Welcome, 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 friend. I'm TK, your tour guide to the past, and you are listening to For the Love of History, the podcast where we talk about world history, women's history, and weird history. And today we have a guest, and I'm so excited because me and this guest and I were brought together by the power of the internet. I love it so much. And she is here today to tell us all about a very special person in history. So, without further ado, welcome Destiny!
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
So excited to have you on. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your podcast?
Yeah, well, so as you said, my name is Destiny. I use she, they pronouns. I have a podcast called Closeted History, LGBTQ plus stories of the past, where we out the queer history that you never knew. But yeah, it's just a podcast, retelling some of the incredible and unique perspectives and stories of those who have come before us, our queer predecessors. Yeah, I am an educator. I have been an educator for 8 years. From the great old state of North Carolina,
Woohoo.
704,
North Kakalaki.
Yes. So that definitely presented some challenges with being a queer, non binary person.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that through looking at some of the history and the literature and just kind of like really immersing myself in the world of queerness, so to speak, looking at these stories, that it's been really, really affirming. And I actually, we're talking about Frida Kahlo before, when I made this episode and like when I was learning about her, I hadn't come out as non binary yet. And, just like, and we can talk more about it later, of course, but,
Yeah.
like her redefinition of femininity and really like what it could be, what it is, and just the way that she like very authentically presented herself, it really inspired me to do the same. And I was able to come out as non-binary.
Yay! That is why learning history and telling history is so important, because if you don't have an idea that that's a possibility in the world, how would you know that you can also be that way? Oh, Destiny, I'm so excited. So yeah, as Destiny said, they are going to tell us all about Frida Kahlo today, and I, like always, have no idea about this topic. So we're on the journey together, friend, and I am so excited. So if Destiny is ready, let's dive right into the episode.
All right. So, of course, you can't talk about Frida without talking about her politics, her paintings, and her wonderful personality. We'll kind of start like in the beginning. When I made this episode, I July is Disability Pride Month, and so I really wanted to take a look at kind of the intersections between those with disabilities and disabled people that have been hidden throughout history, but how that also intersects with LGBTQ plus people.
Yeah.
Like, for example, that, Frida Kahlo was, and we know her to be as bisexual, but she did also have a disability. When she was younger, she got polio and had some issues with her leg, and then when she was 18, she was in an accident, and we'll talk more about that in a bit. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of give like a frame of reference that July is Disability Pride Month, and
Yeah.
looking at the way that those two communities do kind of intersect with each other, it's really important to take that kind of approach, so that we can look at the multiple facets of people's identities and how that ultimately factors into who they are and how they were able to live, and give us some perspective there.
Yeah, the importance of intersectionality.
Yes, but and some of these numbers were really hard to believe, that like, and this figure is a little bit older, but it says that an estimated 3 to 5 million LGBTQ plus people have disabilities.
Wow.
Yeah, well, and you mentioned in the beginning of this, like, the ADHD brain,
Yeah.
that and like, it's becoming more common that people are like, "Oh, hey, I think I'm neurodivergent."
Yes. Yes.
Especially, I think, like, with the pandemic, everybody kind of like being on TikTok together, like, "Oh, wait, that happens to me too?" Or like, "Oh, I thought that was just me doing that weird thing." But
Right? I thought this was my personality. Turns out, no, no, it's a comorbidity.
yep, because I definitely had crab cakes for every single meal for, like, 2 weeks.
Right?
And turns out that's not normal.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people have those intersections. So I'm really appreciate that that's also really important to you in the way that you analyze history as well.
Yes.
So we'll talk about Frida. Let's talk about her early life. So she was born July 6th, 1907, which she actually changed her birth date.
What?
um yes, she actually changed her birth date because she was like, she saw herself as um a daughter of the Mexican Revolution.
Oh.
So, which took place from 1910 to 1920. And
Mhm.
so she identified with that so much that she legally changed her birth date from 1907 to 1910
What?
so that she would be like more associated with the movement.
Oh my gosh. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
so her politics were very important to her, as we'll learn a little bit later. But so she was born July 6th, 1907, 1910,
10.
according
Yeah.
to her, in Coyoacan, Mexico City, Mexico. And I'm actually really excited because my partner and I, in like a month or so, are going to her house.
What?
It's been, yeah, yeah, it's been turned into like a museum and has some of her like old letters and her paintings. And so I am just floored that I even get to be in like the room with her stuff, you know?
That's so cool.
So yeah, yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to that. She was the third child, born to parents Matilde Calderon y Gonzalez and Guillermo Kahlo. Her father was German, and then he moved to Mexico and he got together with her mom. And her family's home, which is referred to as La Casa Azul,
Mhm.
has now been turned into a museum with like her artwork, her personal belongings, some of the letters that she wrote. And she was really close with her father. He was a photographer, and so I think that that's what like helped kind of shape her eye
Mhm.
for art.
Mm.
Was like she was very comfortable posing, for the camera, and she helped him because he also was disabled.
Mm.
He was epileptic, and
Okay.
so they kind of got to share that special bond with each other because, as I mentioned before, that like she got polio when she was 6,
Yeah.
and it impacted the way that like her right leg ultimately grew as she
Mhm.
grew into an adult. But so she was really close with her father, and would help him frequently. She didn't have a really close relationship with her mother. In the research that I've done, it was kind of hard to tell what their relationship was, as especially looking that far back, because her mother was really religious and really, she described her as tense, cruel, and fanatically religious.
Got it.
Um,
Not the greatest relationship.
Yeah, but I think just like everyone else, family dynamics can be complicated to
Yeah.
navigate. And I think that that is just another way that Frida connects to the people and the people connect to Frida,
Mhm.
which just, she's my hero. But so she, even though she did get polio when she was 6, she still like played soccer, she did swimming, she even did wrestling because her father was encouraging her to kind of pursue those things so that she could recover and still like have as much mobility as possible.
Yeah.
And so her father was really, really encouraging when it came to that.
Awesome.
But when she was a young adult, she went to, it's called UNAM
Mhm.
in Mexico City. It's like a very prestigious university. And she went there in 1922. And at the time, there were only 35 females enrolled in the whole school.
What?
Yeah. And so at this point, she's pursuing medical school. She wants to be a doctor.
Mhm.
She begins getting very involved in politics because she joins like a political debate group there. And that's where she meets her first sweetheart. His name is Alejandro Gomez Arias.
Ooh.
And so they were together for a few years, but on September 17th, 1925, at the age of 18, they had been shopping downtown on a gray afternoon and they got onto the bus, but it collided with a streetcar.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so Alejandra was very lucky and walked away with minimal injuries. However, and, just as like a content warning or a
Mhm.
trigger warning for those who are listening. Kahlo, she was hurt. She was really,
Oh
really hurt.
gosh.
She suffered multiple injuries. Her spinal column was broken in three places.
Mm.
Her collarbone was broken, two ribs, and her right leg had 11 fractures. And now remember that like her right leg is also the one that's already been injured due
Ugh.
to polio. So, and it gets worse.
Oh, no.
Yeah, her left shoulder was out of joint and her pelvis was broken in three places
Her
because
pelvis?
um yeah, and this is
Oh.
like according to medical records, she suffered a penetrating abdominal wound caused by an iron handrail and it entered her left hip and exited
Mm.
through her vagina and tearing the left lip.
Oh,
Yeah, so,
Frida.
it like someone who already was just having like a hard time, but like persevering through it all. She
Mhm.
beat polio and was able to still exercise and like,
Ugh.
engage in the things that she loved. And she's pursuing this medical degree. And then, just catastrophe happens and she's very, very badly hurt. And I in another way that I feel like I kind of connect with her, of
Mhm.
course, this horrific accident, I haven't experienced anything like that, and
Yeah.
she is just, but
Yeah.
um but I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia when I was 16.
Oh gosh.
And so, like when she was writing to Alex, her little sweetheart,
Mhm.
from before,
Mm.
she wrote to him and she said, what's going to happen in 30 years? How am I going
Mm.
how's it going to be when I'm 30?
Mhm.
And I just turned 30 this
Oh,
year.
welcome, welcome.
And so, things pop that didn't used to.
Yes.
And
Yes, 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 they
and
do.
and especially with the fibromyalgia that, like just managing it does I mean, you have your good days and your bad days,
Yeah.
but like, in this worry that Frida is sharing with, her partner
Mhm.
Alex, that like I feel like, I've been there. Like,
Yeah.
how am I gonna feel when I'm 30? And of course, again, I'm not like comparing my
No,
injuries
no,
or
no, no,
my
no.
illness, but that like it felt really cool, especially doing the research for this episode, because it was like, I know that she's kind of felt how I have felt before,
Yeah.
or, that like I can kind of resonate, like,
Yeah.
and chronic illness is just, something that
Sucks.
I think it does. It does. And we have so many like very fixated ideas about what illness
Mm.
is and what it looks like and how it presents
Yeah.
itself. And so, those who have chronic illness that like it it's hard to explain to some
Who
people,
don't
and
have
the
it.
the
The
spoonies the
spoonies.
spoonies get it,
You only got
and
so many
the
spoons in a
non-spoonies
day.
don't. And so like I was like, "Ah." I feel
Right.
that. How many spoons am I gonna have when I turn 30, you know?
Right.
And so that was just, another way that, like, I got to connect with
Yeah.
Frida through looking at this
Oh,
lens.
I love
So,
that.
and any other, chronic ill folks or spoony folks
Mm,
out there that, like, maybe that could be a connection that you feel with Frida as
yeah.
well. So I'm happy to share that part. But so when she's, recovering, and she's trying to do her best, Alex's parents didn't really like Frida, and so they sent him to Europe without even allowing him the opportunity to say goodbye.
What?
Um
W
yeah,
ugh,
and so
oh.
Frida says during her interviews, she did an interview with a person named Olga
Mhm.
Campos in 1949 and 1950. She said, I was already in a cast after the accident, and Arias told me that an uncle was going to take him to Europe and that he would not leave me, but he lied to me. I received a letter from him from Veracruz saying he was leaving. It hurt me very much.
Understatement of the
So
century. Oh
she's
my gosh.
right. Right. Like, you get into this catastrophic accident, your boyfriend walks away scratch free, which I love that for
Yeah,
him, but
great.
like then he just skips off to Europe,
Oh my god.
because his parents weren't a big fan of Frida, and I guess, like, oh, okay, well, she's
She's, like, posted up in bed
struggling,
anyways,
so
so I can just go. Oh my god.
right. Yeah. So she spent 1 month in the hospital being immobile in a body cast,
Mm,
and many, many more months bedridden at home.
mm.
And so while we have this woman who is pursuing her dreams and wants to become a doctor, is very involved in politics, really cares about people, um, there is a silver lining to this really tragic
I'm
accident
waiting. I'm
that
ready.
I'm building the
Thank you.
anticipation. It was here at home when she's
Mhm.
bedridden that her father built her a custom easel and a mirror for her to paint self-portraits while she was in bed.
Oh, her dad.
Yes. So, she is using her skills that she learned with her father's
Yeah.
photography, and it's like style for her own work. She did paint herself, her family, and some of her friends from school. And again, I think that that really was kind of shaped by her time with her
Mm,
father, like assisting with the photography, and just kind of seeing like the composition of a piece of
yeah,
art.
yeah.
And so, yeah, she was painting away, making all these self portraits. And she actually, out of her 143 paintings, 55 of them are self portraits.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And she often incorporated like symbolic portrayals of physical and psychological wounds. I really
Oh,
enjoy her storytelling in her photos. And I do want to talk about some of her
yeah.
paintings. So, she was once described as like a surrealist
Mhm,
artist, and she was very adamant that she does not paint
mm.
surrealist. That she says, I never painted dreams. I painted my own reality.
Ooh,
And that, like, I think that it just really shows the power of the storytelling that she created within her art, that she talked about so many different themes. Like, you could get her politics out of it and how she felt about imperialism and capitalism, and because she was a communist very
nice.
openly, like, I think she's like, she was buried in like a dress that has like a big like sickle and hammer on it. And like, she even slept with Leon Trotsky. So like, she was very left. Very, very left. So you get all of this in her painting. So, she like has paintings of herself and how she saw
Mm,
herself, how others saw her, some of her family history, some of the things that she experienced. And, like, for example, because she was in the accident, she had a really hard time having
mm,
children and struggled with
yeah.
infertility. And, it's like 1920, like, 19, it's very
I don't think there's
not the times where that's
yeah.
been talked about,
I don't think there's any IVF, clinics or even talking about infertility other than, like, "Why do you suck at being a woman? Why can't you make a baby right now?" type of a thing.
Right. Exactly. And so, like, the 1930s woman talking about reproductive issues and infertility, like, very openly and authentically. I think that, like, that's just, it's so
Mm,
beautiful the way that, she portrayed herself authentically. And I think that, like, that's something that really often gets missed about
mhm.
Frida, is that, when people see her or they hear her name, they may think of, oh yeah, I know her paintings, the ones
With
with
the
the
eyebrow.
eyebrows
I
and the
think that's
mustache.
verbatim what I said at the beginning of the episode.
And, so people have, like, this idea of Frida in their head, and, the beautiful dresses that
Mm,
she wore, flower crowns, but, she also was just so much more than
mm,
that, because and she told people who she was through her
yeah.
art. She actually has this painting. It's called Two Nudes in a Forest,
2 nudes in
and
a
it's like,
forest.
yes, it was a gift that Frida gave to actress Dolores Del Rio, who resembles one of the
Oh, I
women
just found
painted.
it.
And
Nice.
so, two those of you who are not googling, it's two naked women who are sitting, like, in the background of a forest, and a light skinned woman rests her head on another dark skinned woman's lap. And in the background, they have, like, a scene is being watched by a monkey, which, like, is actually a symbol of lust in
Oh,
Mexican
what?
mythology, and an image of sin in Christian iconography. So, she, like, uses the symbolism, like, oh, am I with this woman? We're both naked. Here's a monkey. Like,
You
you know,
figure it out.
exactly. And it's like, oh, this actress that,
Who
like,
knows? We're not gonna say.
who knows?
Talk to the monkey.
Right. History will call
Right?
them roommates,
They were best
friends.
friends that slept in the same bed for 30 years.
Exactly, exactly. So, I just really appreciate her
Mm,
storytelling of who she was, like, through her art. And one piece in particular that really inspired me, it's called The Two Fridas. It's a painting with two Fridas holding hands, with one that has her heart cut out, and she's, like, in a white, modestly dressed attire, and the other has more of, like, the traditional dresses that Frida was, like, notably seen
yeah.
in, but she has a beating heart that is intact.
Ah.
And she painted this after her and Diego split. Diego Rivera was, like, when people think of Frida, they also think
Yeah.
of her husband, because he was a really famous muralist at the time. And they had a really tumultuous
Mm,
relationship. That's, like, what their relationship was described as in almost everywhere that it's
tumultuous.
listed.
Oh,
But
no.
tumultuous. And but it's interesting because, like, as I mentioned, I
Yeah.
teach English. So, like, one time I was doing an article with my students, just on, one of the sites that has articles for
Yeah.
students, and it mentioned that she was a communist, not
Yeah.
much else. And then it mentioned that she had a relationship with Diego, but, like, there was no mentioning of any of her woman loving woman
Huh.
relationships. Like, of course they brought up Diego and them being together, but,
They didn't
like,
bring up anybody else? She only had the one relationship in her whole
No.
life? Uh-huh. Yeah. Gotcha.
Right. And I think that's just like another example, kind of like what we were talking about
Mhm.
before, that like you can't fault people for what they
Yeah.
don't know. And that like if it's not in the textbook, it's not in this article, unless the only reason why my students know that she is bisexual is because I
Yes.
knew that she's
Yes.
bisexual. And so, like that's why this retelling of history and archiving and really diving into it and learning as much as we can while we have this experience on this
Yeah.
strange rock. That's
Right?
what it's all about. But so back to Frida. I'll because we talked about her paintings, and as I noted before, that she really did not like being called a
Yeah.
surrealist. She actually, so at the age of 32, she traveled to France to display her art for a
Nice.
show, and she was writing letters back to her American lover. His
Oh,
name's Nicholas Murray, who was
Nicholas.
also her photographer.
Oh.
But she expresses how her art was poorly handled and kind of like her true feelings about all the artists that were there. And like these are her actual words from her
Mhm.
letters.
Mhm.
So they were written in English, and like I made sure just to make sure that like nothing got lost in translation from Spanish
Translation.
to, yeah. But so she says, and this is about the artist,
Uh-huh.
you have no idea the kind of bitches these people are. They make me sick. They are so damn intellectual and rotten that I can't stand them anymore. It really is too much for my character. I'd rather sit and sell tortillas than have anything to do with those artistic bitches of
Bitches
Paris.
twice.
Yes. They sit for hours in the cafes warming their precious behinds and talk endlessly about culture, art, revolution, and so on and so forth, thinking themselves the gods of the world, dreaming the most fantastic nonsense and poisoning the air with theories that never come
Damn,
true.
Frida, tell us how you really feel, girl. Jeez.
So she's like writing back to her little lover boy, like, listen, these
These
bitches
bitches
in
in
Paris are
Paris.
bitches.
Fuck these bitches in Paris.
And they have no idea what they're talking about. And so it's fairly obvious that she did not want to be associated with the
Yeah.
surrealist artist. And so now every time I see that quote that like I never painted my dreams, I only painted my own
Mm-mm.
reality. Now every time I see that, I just think about her calling
Sorry.
like the people in
Bitches.
France bitches that are just too much for her
Too much.
character. I'm like, yes. Tell them,
Tell the people,
Frida.
Frida.
Tell
Oh
them.
my gosh. I just love
Yes. But
that.
so
You never think of like women in in this time period calling people bitches. Like
oh yeah, and she just was like letting
so
them have
funny.
it.
Oh,
But it's funny because the like one piece of art that she took with her
mhm.
when she was traveling to
With the
France with the
bitch.
bitches, um it's now still the only museum in Europe to have a piece of work by Frida
Really?
Kahlo. So like in all of Europe, it's the only place.
What?
Yes, I would say where it is, but I
I'm gonna
will
Google
not
it.
do so
Only
very
Frida
well.
Kahlo in Europe.
So,
Frida Kahlo in Paris. Is it like
yeah, that's the name of
okay?
the place.
Frida Kahlo in Paris, maybe, yeah. And then the art is like a self portrait of Frida, and there's like a bunch of flowers, and there's like two
Mhm.
birds on either side of her. Yes.
Mhm.
And I'll put a link to this in the show notes and on Instagram so that people can see it. Okay, continue. Yes.
Yeah, so, she spent some time in France. Her and Diego were kind of like touring around the US for him to do some murals. But, she was always trying to like show her work and have a separate
Mhm.
identity from him. which, as we mentioned, apparently is impossible. Um, but so they split up for a little bit of time, but then they ended up getting remarried and their relationship became less
All right.
turbulent, whatever that means, um, as Frida Kahlo's health
Mm.
was deteriorating. Because she often had to wear like supportive back
Mm.
corsets to help her spine. She had an infectious skin condition, which like actually led to her leg eventually being
Oh,
amputated. Yeah. And when her father died in 1941, because she was so close to him, that like really exasperated both her
yeah.
depression and
Oh,
her health, because your mental health
directly.
is goes right along with
Yep.
that physical health. And she was struggling, so she was often
Mm.
housebound, and she found the simple pleasure in surrounding herself with animals and tending to the garden at La
Mhm.
Casa Azul. And she actually kept monkeys as pets, and said that they were the children that she
Oh,
could not
Frida.
bear. And she has like some paintings that have
Mhm.
monkeys in them as well. So, when you see some of those paintings as well, then you
Oh,
know that connection
her
because
little
those are her
baby
little babies.
monkeys. So cute.
Yes. But so she exhibited one last
Mhm.
time in Mexico in 1953, because after they, you know, toured around the US, she did some traveling. They went back to Mexico. She's, trying to live her life
Yeah.
as well as she can. Her father dies. But so she exhibited one last time in 1953 at Lola
Mm.
Alvarez Bravo's gallery. It was her first and only solo show in
Oh.
Mexico. And she was actually brought to the event in an ambulance, with her four-poster bed following on the back of a truck. And the bed was then placed in the center of the gallery so that she
Oh,
could just lay there like during
come
the
on,
duration.
accessibility.
Um,
Yes. Oh my gosh.
yeah, so she's like, I'm taking the ambulance to my own solo,
Show.
exhibit. I gotta be there. And I just,
Mm.
like
Yeah.
resilience, even in the last moments of her life, like, I feel like anything that was thrown at her, she was
Just
ready
freaking
to face
rolled
it.
with the punches
Um,
and like sorry to throw in a weird military saying, but all I can hear is my dad in the back of my head saying adapt and overcome, adapt and overcome. Like,
I mean that she was doing it,
oh.
she was doing it. But so she had her last gallery, and she died in 1954 at La
Mm.
Casa Azul. And while the official cause of death was given as a pulmonary embolism, questions have been risen about suicide,
Mm.
whether deliberate or accidental. But unfortunately, there was never an
Oh.
autopsy completed.
Do you know why?
Um,
Or just it
so
wasn't a thing?
I don't know the
Mm.
answer to that question, but um,
I mean,
you know, I just I think that like there just wasn't one done, and then now, like,
it's you can't
what can we
autopsy
do?
bones. So,
Right. Um and unfortunately, yeah, she was very young when she passed away. She
mm.
was 47 years old.
Oh.
Um but her last painting, called Viva la Vida,
Mm.
Watermelons, is a bright, and if you should definitely include that in the
I
show notes as
will.
well. But it's a bright and vibrant celebration of love or life that features rich color contrast, curves and angles, and a final message from the artist herself.
Mm.
She put the finishing touches on her watermelon themed painting just a few days before her death,
Oh.
and she inscribed Vida la Vida on the central melon wedge at the bottom of the canvas, which translates to long live life,
Oh.
just 8 days before she died.
Oof, I got
And in
goosebumps.
her diary, the final entry stated, I hope the exit is joyful, and I hope to never return.
Oh,
Yep. So I think, the legacy of Frida Kahlo definitely
I
can't be
know.
understated. She was a revolutionist. Very, very involved in politics. She was a
Mm.
beautiful person, created amazing artwork, and one of my personal heroes. So it has been so, so very cool sharing this with you
Ooh,
and
thank
with
you.
others.
It was I feel like should have known more about her earlier because you see all the time those posters and t-shirts. I think Urban Outfitters has done at least 1,000 different iterations of a Frida Kahlo like self-portrait t-shirt, and there's all of these other companies that I don't know if any money is actually given to any Frida Kahlo organization or if they're just profiting off of her image. So knowing her story makes me want makes me both upset and filled with that same like I can't even make a good sentence right now. Just that same kind of like, oh, oh snap. She was a real person. She was so badass. She had a lot of experiences that maybe aren't exactly the same as the ones that I'm facing right now, but I can empathize with that. And it makes me feel a little bit better that this woman in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s was just living her best life, even though she had all of this adversity and she made it work for her. And I absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Destiny. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's
Mhm.
just kind of going back to what you were saying about her image, that like that I think has been a really
Yeah.
important part of this story, is telling like who she was outside of just the very commercialized corporate
Yes.
image that we know of her. Like, she's on t-shirts,
Yeah.
she's on tote bags, on mugs, and I think Frida would be
Yes.
rolling in
She'd
her
be calling
grave
all of us
because
bitches.
she was. Exactly. Well, because she was
Mhm.
very anti-capitalist, and I think that, people want that authenticity. They want people to be honest, but like when we take a look back at people, we can see how she's been kind of her
Yeah.
story has been watered down. Like, some stories don't mention her
Mhm.
politics of her being a communist. Some don't mention her bisexual relationships, like her relationships with women. And I of course, because
Mhm.
I feel very connected to her and she's one of my personal heroes, that like I just kind of wanted to
Yeah.
do her justice by allowing her story to be heard and for others to be able to connect through that story as well. And so, I have really, really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for
Oh my
having me
gosh,
on the
it's my
show. I really
absolute
appreciate it.
pleasure. I'm sure all of the listeners out there, I call them my delicious little donuts, which is super weird, but I love it.
I mean, delicious little donuts. I hope that you enjoyed the
I'm sure they
the
did, and I
show.
absolutely loved it. And I'll put all of those pictures, those paintings that you talked about, I'll put them in the show notes. I'll post them on Instagram so that everybody can see them because they're absolutely gorgeous. And I think to get the full impact of the story, you need to see all of the paintings that Destiny mentioned in the episode. And speaking of social media and finding people in different places, Destiny, can you tell us where we can find you if we want some more you?
Yes, yes. So, I do have the podcast
Mhm.
Closeted History, and so you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, um, LinkedIn, all the socials. You can find us on all of the socials. Instagram is probably the best way. We do also have a website if you're interested in checking it out. And then we also have a YouTube channel because this season, so as I mentioned, I'm in my second season.
Yeah.
This season, we're doing more like video style.
Nice.
So, because the ADHD brain, I
Right?
need I need a visual to
Exactly.
go with my story. So,
Exactly.
um, so definitely check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, like, comment. Come hang out with us over on YouTube. I read all of the comments, and I just really enjoy sharing this with others. And so I hope to share it with more.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, you have a lifelong fan in me, and I'm sure other people out there will be subscribing and tuning into your podcast. Thank you so much, Destiny. I will put all of that information in the show notes and, of course, shout you out on Instagram so people can find you there. And I will see you, delicious little donut, in the outro. Okay, bye. Well, dear one, we have come to the end of our episode. Thank you once again to Destiny for sharing her knowledge about Frida Kahlo. That was incredibly interesting for me, and I hope that you thought it was interesting as well. If you did, consider sending this episode to your other history BFF or someone who you think needs to be converted into a history lover. If you're watching this on YouTube, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. And if you're listening to the audio version, why don't you go ahead and leave a rating and a 5-star review? It really helps appease the algorithm and the SEO gods, so it would be very helpful. And I would love you forever. And don't forget to check out the new and improved Patreon. Become a patron, where you can receive these episodes in advance, which is so much fun. You get to be a part of an exclusive club. You can also support the podcast by buying some amazing merch. We actually have some History Hippo merch available in the links in the show notes below. If you're on Instagram, you know about the History Hippo. And if you're not in the know about the History Hippo, that's totally okay. We have lots of other wonderful designs, all made by yours truly, so I'm a little bit biased. But whatever you do, thank you for spending your time with us today. Thank you for supporting For the Love of History. And before we go, don't forget to do something for yourself to make you happy this week. And every day. Really, you should be doing it every day. And absolutely, don't forget to drink your water. And I will see you next week when we talk about the Dead Pope trial. Ooh, I'm so excited. Okay, love you. Bye.